Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has resumed full duties after a recent hospital stay that was kept under wraps for several days from the public, the press, and even the president. And he is still reportedly in the hospital as of Saturday evening. For his part, Secretary Austin admits he could have been more transparent about the hospitalization, which began on New Year's Day following complications from an elective surgery. CNN's Priscilla Alvarez is in Washington. Hello, Priscilla. An official says President Biden has complete confidence still in Austin, but there's been quite some reaction across the Biden administration.
Well, there has been criticism that we only learned of this news Friday evening after he was hospitalized on New Year's Day and had remained in the hospital over the course of the week. But this is an unusual set of circumstances. We know that yesterday President Biden spoke with Secretary Lloyd Austin, and that is when the White House said that the president remains confident in the secretary. But this comes after learning that he was in the hospital starting on New Year's Day. And it was, source tells us, after the president was informed about it by National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, days after the secretary was admitted to the hospital. Now, he was admitted because of complications to a medical procedure, and Austin admitted during that time that he should have been more transparent. But we should also note that sources tell us that on New Year's Day, the same day that Secretary Austin was admitted to the hospital, was a day that he was on a call with top national security officials, including President Biden, over a series of issues, including escalating tensions in the Red Sea, which goes to underscore how key and critical he is to the administration. But it's unclear whether he was in the hospital at that point or if it came before then. But all of this to say that this came as a shock to senior administration officials, not only because the defense secretary was hospitalized, but also because of the delay in informing the public and informing the White House. Now, Secretary Austin has conceded that he should have been more transparent, saying in a statement, quote, "I also understand the media concerns about transparency, and I recognize I could have done a better job ensuring the public was appropriately informed. I commit to doing better." He goes on to say, "But this is important to say. This was my medical procedure, and I take full responsibility for my decisions about disclosure." Again, this is a statement that came yesterday. The Department of Defense only notified the press on Friday after the secretary had been in the hospital over the course of the week. It is unclear what the procedure was or what the complications were. They have not disclosed that. But what does remain clear from the White House is that the president remains confident in his defense secretary.
All right, Priscilla Alvarez, thank you. Let's talk more about this with CNN military analyst, retired Lieutenant General Mark Hertling. General Hertling, great to see you as always. So I do want to get your reaction to this because the Pentagon Press Association is calling the delay in a statement and disclosing Austin's hospitalization. They're calling it an outrage. They're saying Austin has no claim to privacy in this situation. I mean, and perhaps they're referring to the fact that Austin was hospitalized, not particularly his condition or what procedure he had. But doesn't the public, especially the president, have the right to know that the defense secretary is in the hospital, that he's been hospitalized?
Well, the right is at issue here, Amara. And first of all, Happy New Year to both you and Victor. First, I'd like to say the folks at Walter Reed are phenomenal. That's a great organization. They handle all their senior DoD civilians and military medical issues like physical and elective procedures. I've been through a couple of physicals there myself. I think the public should know they even have special suites for VIPs so that they continue communications and their missions. Secretary Austin probably had a commo team with him, and that's why he was able to continue to communicate with the White House. There are really two issues here. First of all, Austin's privacy and the need to give a heads up to your boss if you're hospitalized. The public doesn't have a right to know. Your boss does have a need to know. I don't know what the procedure was, but it was reported as an elective surgery, as Priscilla just said, that had complications. Having worked in the medical field since I've retired, that's not unusual, and some of those procedures can be embarrassing. It was probably an elective surgery waited to get done during the holidays that became more serious than expected. He and his staff should have notified the NSC or the White House to be sure. It's always good to let your boss know if you're hospitalized for something, and we don't know what occurred that didn't allow that to happen. But DOD is truthfully, Amber, and this is the important point, is prevented from talking about the medical issues of any of their personnel, even the SecDef, due to privacy issues and HIPAA requirements, which require specific privacy in healthcare disclosures. The SecDef said he'll try and do better. That's a good thing in that press release that Priscilla talked about. But I thought the most important part of that press release was when he said this was his medical issue and he took full responsibility for the disclosure decision. I admire him for that.
Well, General, so the secretary was on the phone with the president on the day of the admission to the hospital on New Year's Day. Right. We don't know if this was before or after this procedure. And maybe you don't tell everybody on the call, hey guys, I'm at Walter Reed and I'm going to go under general anesthesia. Right. But in that moment, is it reasonable to expect he made a decision not to tell the president?
I don't know, Victor. Again,
I only asked that because you know him. I mean, he was a classmate at West Point.
No, but what I would say is he may have been going in for a 25-minute elective surgery, and I can think of dozens of those that could have been happening. But it was when that elective surgery had complications that he was asked to stay at the hospital. But the fact that he was on that call tells me his commo team was with him. It could have been at the hospital, or it could have been from his home or wherever. But these kind of individuals, these very important people in the Department of Defense, have constant contact with the authorities. So no matter where he goes, that commo team travels with him, hooks up communications lines, links satellite feeds. So it could have been from his home, it could have been from the hospital. I don't know. But it shows me that he had constant contact. And again, I go back to the point, should he have told his boss? Probably. Hey, Mr. President, I'm going to be in the hospital for a while. I'm having a procedure. And then call back and say, hey, it's got complications, so they're asking me to stay for a while. I just don't know. But again, the privacy issues come into call on this one.
Sure, point taken. But General, I mean, are you shocked in any way that, I mean, it was, if you look at the timeline, January 1st is when he was hospitalized, Secretary Austin. It wasn't until January 4th, 4 days later, that President Biden was notified by his national security advisor, who had learned that the defense secretary was in the hospital. And also the context. I mean, there are wars raging in Ukraine, in Israel. There's the escalating tensions in the Red Sea with the Houthi rebels. Just a few days ago, there was a U.S. launch of a strike in Baghdad against an Iranian proxy group. So when you just get all that into context here, were you not shocked that the president did not know until 4 days later his critical cabinet member was in the hospital?
Yeah, I was surprised, Amara. There's no doubt about it. Like I said, you should inform your boss if you're in the hospital. But it also tells me we don't know what kind of communication was going on. Was Secretary Austin continuing to communicate the whole time he was admitted to the hospital? I don't know. So these kinds of actions that were taking place, first of all, he could have been in continuous communication with the White House, with the National Security Council. The other thing that I'll bring up is the Secretary of Defense has several deputies, and they know to take his place when he's not there. When Secretary Austin is traveling the world, the Assistant Secretary or Deputy Secretary of Defense, or the policy person in DOD, takes his place at NSC meetings and at White House communication events. So when he's all over the world, that happens normally. So was I surprised? Yes. Was I shocked? No, not really. I mean, I would have thought he would have done better. But truthfully, I think some of the rage that's going on, and like in the Washington Post this morning, where there were Republican senators calling for his resignation, I just think that's absolutely ludicrous.
Retired Lieutenant General Mark Hertling, thank you.
Thank you.